They all turned to look at me the moment I walked into the garden, but only one face drained of color, hers. In my hand, the thin red fabric trembled like a wounded secret finally dragged into the light, and nothing was louder than the silence that followed. For years, I believed my marriage to Daniel was steady, ordinary, safe, the kind built on morning coffee, shared bills and polite routines. But lately, the quiet of our home felt stretched too thin, as if something inside its walls had shifted. When I discovered the red lingerie hidden beneath the backseat of his car, I knew it didn't belong to me, and I knew exactly whose it was. Tonight, I walked into her family's celebration not to cause chaos, but to return what was never mine. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the driveway was already warm beneath my knees. I remember the way the morning light slid across the car's interior, soft and gold, as if nothing in my life was about to change. I was just cleaning, wiping crumbs from the seats, shaking out the mats, small, ordinary things that make a home feel steady. Then my hand brushed against something soft, something that didn't belong in my world. A slip of red lace, thin as a whisper, bright as a wound. And suddenly the morning didn't feel warm anymore. I sat back on my heels, letting the fabric rest in my palm. It felt unreal, the way certain truths do at first. Fragile, weightless, yet heavy enough to tilt your entire life. The street was quiet, lined with sleepy houses and trimmed lawns. A dog barked somewhere far away, as if reacting to something it couldn't see. For a moment, I tried to tell myself a story that made sense. Maybe it belonged to someone else. Maybe I'd dropped something without remembering. Maybe Daniel had picked up a bag for a coworker, or maybe. The mind reaches for comfort, even when it knows better. I held it up to the light, and the lace glowed like a thin slice of heart. The size tag peeked out. Small, too small for me. And then there was the perfume. Sweet, flowery, not mine. Not mine in a way that felt personal. I closed my eyes, let the stillness swallow the sound around me. Even the wind paused, as if the whole neighborhood was holding its breath with me. I tried to set the fabric aside, but it clung to my fingers like it wanted to be seen, wanted the truth to be named. And deep down, beneath years of practiced trust, something inside me whispered the answer I didn't want. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message I wasn't supposed to find. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for shadows to shift across the yard. Long enough for a neighbor to wave at me from across the street. Unaware of the storm quietly gathering in my hands. When I finally stood, my legs felt unsteady. I walked toward the porch, the fabric still pinched between my fingers. Part of me wanted to drop it in the trash. Another part wanted to throw it at him. But mostly, I wanted to forget I'd ever touched it. Inside the house, the clock ticked in that slow, old rhythm it always had. Daniel's cup from the morning still sat in the sink, a faint ring of coffee clinging to its rim. I stared at it, wondering how a man could drink from the same cup every day and still build a second life in the shadows. As I moved through the house, everything looked the same. The framed photos, the folded blanket on the sofa, the shoes neatly placed by the door. Nothing had changed, and yet everything felt different. Like the walls were listening, like they already knew. I set the lingerie on the kitchen table. The red looked too bright against the wood, almost defiant. A small, sharp truth in a room full of gentle lies. I should have waited to talk to him. I should have taken a breath, calmed my thoughts, rehearsed my words. But fate doesn't always wait for timing. It comes quietly in small moments, like a notification lighting up a screen. His phone buzzed on the counter. Once, twice, again. I glanced at it, not out of suspicion this time, but out of instinct. A simple human reflex. Her name lit the screen, the same name that had appeared a few times before. Late evening texts he'd brushed off as work messages or wrong number. But I saw the preview this time, a single line. Soft, familiar, unmistakable. Last night, I can't stop thinking about it. The room tilted a little. Not dramatically, not like the movies. It was subtle, a small shift in gravity, enough for my breath to catch. The red fabric on the table, her name on his screen, the perfume still clinging to my hands, pieces falling into their rightful places. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't read more. I didn't need to. Sometimes truth doesn't need to scream. It just stands quietly in the doorway and waits for you to look it in the eyes. I stepped back, as if distance could soften the weight pressing into my chest. My heartbeat felt slow, heavy, like it needed more space than my body could offer. I thought of all the mornings he'd kissed my forehead, All the times he'd said, "I'm tired, I'm working late, don't wait up." I wondered when the truth had begun, and how long I'd been living beside it without knowing. I returned to the driveway, the air cooler now as clouds drifted over the sun. The red lace remained in my pocket, a quiet reminder rubbing against my fingers with every step. The street was empty, still. A calm stage waiting for the next scene to unfold. I leaned against the car door, closing my eyes, letting the wind brush against me like a question I wasn't ready to answer. How do you confront a betrayal that has already become fact? How do you speak when your voice feels like it might shatter? I didn't know yet, but I knew one thing. The truth had arrived, and it wasn't leaving. The night felt heavier than it should have, like the air had thickened just enough to press against my ribs. I remember standing in front of the mirror, smoothing the front of my plain dress, my hands steady in a way my heart wasn't. Outside, the world was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that happens before rain or confession. I didn't choose to go to her family's party out of anger. Anger burns fast. This felt slower, deeper, like the settling of dust after something breaks. When I stepped into the night, even the wind sounded unsure of me. Her sister had posted it online earlier that morning. A birthday dinner. A soft-lit gathering. The kind of event families plan months ahead. I must have stared at the photo longer than necessary, my mind pulling at threads until something inside me simply decided. Maybe it was the way she smiled in that picture, like she'd won something quietly. Maybe it was the memory of the red lace, or the text on his phone. Or maybe it was just time. Time for truth to find its way back to its owner. I dressed with deliberate slowness. No jewelry, no makeup, just a simple dress the color of ash. My hair pulled back, my palms cool. It felt less like getting ready and more like preparing for a ritual, one where I didn't know the ending. Driving there, the road stretched longer than I remembered. Headlights washed over empty fields, over mailboxes, over shadows that seemed to tilt toward me as I passed. Every mile felt like a question, and every question felt heavier than the last. When I finally turned onto her street, laughter spilled from the windows, warm, bright, unaware. Music hummed from somewhere inside the house. The driveway was full. Cars lined the curb, their metal skins catching the porch light like polished secrets. I stepped out of my car slowly, almost like someone rising from underwater, because no one expected me, because I wasn't supposed to exist in her world, and because I knew the truth had to walk in with me. The moment I entered the yard, the sound of clinking glasses floated toward me, soft, rhythmic, like bells calling people into a celebration I wasn't meant to witness. Her family moved around the space with ease, plates in their hands, small conversations blooming and fading like warm light. No one saw me at first, or maybe they did, but didn't recognize me out of context. A face they'd seen once on social media, a name mentioned in passing, his wife, spoken in tones that probably grew quieter over the past months. I stood near a row of lanterns strung across the fence. Their glow flickered onto my hands, onto the small, folded object inside my bag. Red fabric, quiet and waiting, like a truth finally ready to breathe. She appeared near the sliding door, laughing, leaning into a story someone was telling. Her hair curled softly around her shoulders. A woman comfortable in her skin, in her night, in the life she thought she owned completely. When she turned her head and saw me, the laughter around her continued, but her smile cracked in the center, just enough. Her steps slowed as she approached. "Are you lost?" she whispered, low enough not to disturb the perfect world around her. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because truth, no matter how quiet, carries its own gravity. And in that moment, I felt everyone else's conversations drift further away, like the world was stepping back to give us room. We stood there, two women separated by a few feet and one man's choices. The music behind her softened, blending into the hum of night insects and distant highway noise. She tried to compose herself, smoothing her dress, tucking her hair behind her ear, glancing over her shoulder as if hoping someone would interrupt us. No one did. I reached into my bag slowly, feeling the softness of the fabric between my fingers. Red lace, bright even in the dim light, a color that didn't belong to me, but had found its way into my life like an unwelcome clue. Her eyes followed my hand, and when she saw it, truly saw it, something inside her face shifted. Not panic, not guilt, something quieter. Recognition maybe, or resignation. I held it out, not far, just enough for the night air to brush against it. She didn't take it, She didn't speak. For a long moment, neither of us moved. And in that stillness, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to before. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about all the silences that had led us here. All the nights he'd said, "I'm working late." All the mornings he'd kissed my cheek without meeting my eyes. Her breath trembled first. A small inhale, a small break. "I didn't mean for you to," she whispered. But the sentence never finished, because some truths don't need endings. They just reveal the space left behind. I placed the red fabric gently into her hand. She didn't resist this time. Her fingers closed around it slowly, as if the weight of it surprised her. Behind us, her family kept laughing, unaware that a quiet fracture had opened, right there in the glow of their lantern-lit celebration. I stepped back. The grass bent softly under my shoes. The night had thinned, and somewhere far above, a cloud drifted away from the moon. She looked at me, her face pale beneath the warm lights, holding the truth I no longer needed to carry. I didn't say another word. I didn't have to. I turned and walked toward the street, each step steady, each breath a little freer. And as the door closed behind me, I knew this wasn't the end. Just the moment the story chose to stop hiding. There are moments in life when silence becomes louder than any voice. Walking into that garden felt like stepping into one of those moments. A space where the air itself paused, waiting. Lanterns swung gently from the trees, casting soft gold light across the grass. And laughter fluttered above the tables like wings trying too hard to stay afloat. I stood at the edge of it all, still as a shadow that didn't belong to the scene. The folded red fabric in my hand felt warm, alive almost, like the truth had its own pulse. And when her eyes lifted, everything else in the garden seemed to fall away. I hadn't expected it to feel this quiet. Parties usually hum with distraction, music, conversation, the clatter of plates. But as I moved deeper into the garden, each sound seemed to separate itself from the others, as if unwilling to cross the space between me and her. People glanced my way, their faces soft with polite curiosity. I must have looked like a misplaced character. In their easy evening, I'm the wife they'd heard of but never truly met, a name attached to someone else's story. I kept moving, slow enough to feel each blade of grass bend beneath my steps, slow enough to feel the cool night air run fingers along my arms. In my hand, the red lingerie stayed neatly folded, a small square of truth wrapped in lace and quiet humiliation. She stood near the dessert table, surrounded by her family's warmth. She always looked most comfortable in borrowed spaces, places where she wasn't responsible for the rules, only for the charm she carried like a small, practiced smile. But tonight, that smile faltered the moment she saw me. Her hand tightened slightly around her glass. Her shoulders lifted in a breath she didn't finish, and the world between us stretched thin, like a thread pulled too tight. In that fragile quiet, I felt my own heartbeat slow. Not out of fear, but out of acceptance. This moment had been waiting for both of us. When our eyes locked, something in the garden shifted. A soft ripple, like wind brushing over still water. People didn't stop talking, not fully. But their words softened, dimmed, as if curiosity had pressed a gentle hand against their mouths. I took one step toward her, then another. The lantern light followed me like a quiet witness. She didn't move, didn't blink, just watched, her smile collapsing in slow motion, piece by fragile piece. The nervousness I'd always sensed in her, in the way she avoided my gaze, in the way she laughed a little too quickly around me, finally had a reason big enough to show itself. The folded red fabric felt heavier the closer I got to her. I held it low, near my side, almost like an offering, though it was anything but peace. When I reached her, the scent of her perfume, floral, sharp, not mine, rose between us. It was the same scent that had clung to the fabric the day I found it, the same scent that had followed me into sleepless nights filled with quiet, unwelcome clarity. She reached for her glass, as if needing something to hold onto, but her fingers slipped against the stem. It made a faint clink against the plate beside it, a tiny, fragile sound that somehow echoed louder than the music behind us. Her eyes flicked around the garden, searching for an exit, a distraction, someone who might save her from the moment settling between us. But no one was watching closely. No one suspected the fracture, unfolding in the glow of warm lights and sugared pastries. When she finally looked at me again, her voice was barely there. "Please, don't do this here." The words trembled, but not out of innocence. No, it felt more like fear of being seen for who she was. I stepped closer, just enough that the red fabric brushed against her hand. She flinched, not dramatically, just a small ripple in her composure, like a curtain shifting in a draft. "I didn't want—" she started, then stopped. The sentence hung in the air, unfinished, dishonest. I waited. The way you wait to see if truth will choose to speak for itself. Her shoulders sagged. Her eyes dropped to the fabric in my hand. Her silence grew heavier, thicker, until even the night seemed to hold its breath. And it was in that silence, not in words, that everything was confirmed. Every late-night message, every sudden work trip, every distant look he'd worn coming home. Her silence was the confession, and I felt the truth settle inside me with unexpected calm. The garden lights trembled gently above us, swaying in the soft night breeze. Music drifted behind the dessert table, soft, cheerful, painfully unaware. I placed the lingerie into her open hand, not forcefully, just returned, the way lost things eventually find their rightful place. She looked down at it, as if it were burning her skin. Her breath shook. Her fingers curled around it slowly, like accepting a consequence she had hoped would never come home. I stepped back, giving her the space she suddenly seemed desperate for. In the distance, someone laughed, bright and carefree, as if the night wasn't splitting quietly in the garden's shadows. I turned, letting the path toward the gate guide me out. Behind me, she whispered something too soft to catch. But it didn't matter. The truth had already spoken. The house felt too warm when I stepped inside. The kind of warmth that doesn't comfort, just sits on your skin like a warning. Laughter rolled through the living room in soft waves, slipping under the doorway of the garden where the party lights swayed in the evening breeze. I stood there for a moment, letting the air settle around me, letting my breath catch up with my heart. In my hand, the red lace trembled like a frightened bird. Not mine, never mine. And tonight it was finally going home. The garden was dressed in soft yellow bulbs, the kind that made every face look gentler than the truth. Children chased each other across the grass. Someone's uncle kept fanning himself with a paper plate. The dessert table sagged under the weight of too much sweetness. And then there was her, standing near the strawberry tarts, glass of lemonade held too tight, shoulders pulled in like she was trying to disappear into her own spine. She didn't see me at first. She was laughing at something her cousin said. Too loud, too quick, like she didn't want anyone to notice the tremor underneath. I walked across the grass slowly, letting the small stones crunch under my shoes. The sound turned a few heads, not hers yet, but enough to make the breeze hesitate. The lace in my hand brushed against my palm. A whisper of perfume rose from it, familiar only because it wasn't mine. That scent had lived somewhere near him. On him, maybe in his car, maybe in the spaces between his excuses. I kept walking. When she finally lifted her head, the moment folded in on itself. Her smile dropped the way a candle goes out, quiet, almost respectful. She didn't breathe. Or maybe I just couldn't hear it anymore. I stopped in front of her, leaving just enough distance for honesty to step between us. She stared at my hand before she dared look at my face. Her fingers twitched around her glass. The lace felt heavier now, as if it understood the moment it was about to unravel. I didn't speak. Words felt unnecessary tonight. She swallowed, throat jerking like she'd been rehearsing a lie and forgotten the lines. Her cousin stepped back, sensing the shift. Someone's fork scraped against a plate. The music inside the house paused, as if the wires felt the tension too. I lifted my hand. The red fabric glowed under the string lights, soft and quiet, but sharper than any accusation I could ever make. I placed it gently in her palm. Her fingers tightened around it, not in acceptance, but in panic. The fabric slid between her fingers anyway, slipping like a confession that didn't want to stay hidden any longer. Her lips parted. My name fell out, broken at the edges. But her eyes, those eyes were searching for someone who wasn't me. Someone who had promised her things he had already taken from me. The air tightened. The night leaned in, and she whispered it. My husband's name, barely a sound, but enough to split the world open. Her whisper wasn't meant for me. It was a plea, maybe to herself, maybe to him, maybe to the truth that had finally come knocking. Her mother's head turned first, slow, like someone watching a glass fall before it breaks. Her eyes moved from the red lace to her daughter's trembling hand, to me, and I watched understanding melt across her face, not fast like anger, but slow like grief. recognition sinking bone deep. Her mother stepped toward us, her voice soft, barely formed. Is that? Her daughter shook her head too quickly. No, Mom, it's nothing. But the fabric betrayed her. It always had. Her mother's breath shuddered. Who does it belong to? I didn't answer. Answering would feel merciful, and mercy wasn't mine to give tonight. The girl couldn't hold her mother's gaze. Her shoulders curled inward. A quiet apology trembled in her hands, but she couldn't lift her eyes long enough to offer it. Silence wrapped around us like wet cloth, heavy, suffocating. Someone in the family asked if everything was okay. No one replied. The dessert table suddenly felt too bright, too innocent, too sweet for what stood before it. I stood there, still quiet, still holding nothing but truth. Truth had weight. Truth had timing. And tonight, it was speaking through silence. But beneath all of it, beneath the shaking hands and the cracked voices, one question rose like smoke. What will Daniel do when he hears what his lover has just confessed with her eyes? I stepped back, letting the night reclaim the space between us. She held the lace to her chest like a wound she didn't know how to hide. Her family stood frozen, the kind of stillness that only arrives when the truth is too loud to ignore. The wind brushed past me, carrying her perfume, the same one I'd smelled on the fabric, past my cheek, like a final reminder. I didn't look back at her. I didn't need to. The moment had already carved itself into everyone around us. As I walked toward the gate, the party lights flickered behind me. Flickered, then steadied, the kind of steadiness that comes right before a storm. And I knew Daniel would feel its first drop tonight. The moment I stepped outside, the air changed. It was colder than I expected. The kind of cold that doesn't sting, just reminds you that you're still here. The noise from the garden faded behind me, settling into a dull, distant hum. Like a radio someone forgot to turn off. I could still feel their eyes on my back, even after the door closed. I didn't run. I didn't need to. I just walked, slow and quiet, letting the night wrap itself around me. Sometimes leaving isn't loud. It's just the first time you hear your own footsteps again. The driveway stretched long and empty, lit only by the weak glow of porch lights and the shimmer of someone's wind chimes moving without wind. My hands were steady now, steadier than they had any right to be. A few minutes earlier, they'd held her trembling fingers, her borrowed guilt, her secret that was never supposed to reach the light. But here, away from the murmurs and half-finished gasps, my body felt strangely weightless, like something had been cut loose. I paused at the end of the yard, where the grass thinned into gravel. The house behind me was alive with clinking glasses, music that didn't know it should stop, and the kind of polite confusion that soon turns sharp. I didn't wait for it. I'd lived in sharpness long enough. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket, once, twice, then again in a desperate rhythm. Daniel's name pulsed on the screen, refusing to be ignored. But I let it ring. I let it blink itself out. Some truths deserve silence before they earn answers. I lifted my head to the night sky. The clouds were thin, letting stars peek through like shy children. I hadn't looked up like this in a long time. When you're carrying someone else's secrets, you forget how big the world is, and how small a liar becomes under it. I took a few steps down the quiet road, gravel crunching beneath my shoes. The sound was soft but sure, like the earth was clearing its throat after holding a secret with me. Street by street, the party's glow shrank behind trees and hedges. Every corner I turned peeled another layer of noise from my skin. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message. Then another. The last one just said, "Please pick up." I didn't. I wasn't ready for his voice. Not the one he practiced for patients or friends or family gatherings. Not the voice that could fix a broken bone, but somehow couldn't stay honest. With a beating heart, I tucked the phone deeper into my pocket and kept walking. The pavement was cool, almost damp, and a thin mist sat low over the road like the night was exhaling. A dog barked 2 houses away. Somewhere someone closed a window. Life was being lived normally, freely, in places untouched by the kind of betrayal I had just laid bare. It made me wonder, how many women walk like this every night? Not running, not collapsing, just walking away from noise that finally showed its true shape. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in months, the not knowing didn't frighten me. I found myself near a small park at the end of the neighborhood, the swings moving gently, as if they remembered children from earlier that day. I sat on a bench, the wood cool beneath my palms. and let myself breathe, really breathe, like my ribs were relearning the motion. My phone lit up again. Daniel's face flashed across the screen, smiling the way he used to before. Truth became something he hid in glove compartments and late-night messages. I watched the phone vibrate in my hand, watched until the call ended, watched until the screen went black again. Then, slowly, I pressed the power button and turned it off. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, like the world was finally speaking in a language I understood. I leaned back, looking at the sky again, a sky too big for the smallness of lies. My fingers brushed the bench's edge, feeling the splintered wood, grounding me in a moment that belonged to no one but me. And in that stillness, a question rose quietly. Not sharp, not hurting, just honest. What does a woman do when the secrets she's carrying finally fall from her hands? I didn't have the answer yet. But for once, the question didn't scare me. It felt like freedom beginning. I stood from the bench, brushing a thin layer of dust from my dress. The night had grown colder, but it didn't feel unkind. It felt clean, like something was resetting itself around me. Behind me, the party's laughter was a faint, dying echo. Ahead of me, the road was quiet and open. I started walking again, slow, steady steps, each one a little lighter. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or which truth Daniel would try to build with his shaking voice. But tonight wasn't his. Tonight belonged to the woman who finally stopped carrying what was never hers. And as the wind lifted my hair, soft and gentle, I whispered to no one, "Let's see who I become now."